What's up, everybody? Let me know if you can hear me out there. Check one, two, three. Good evening, and welcome to a late night live stream. Got a couple of people here hanging out. If anyone's brave enough, let me know that you can hear me in the comments to reveal your identity. Late night streaming. Let's see here. Yeah, everyone's gonna have to bear with me on my technological savviness. So if you can hear me, give me a thumbs up in the comment section, or send me a text if you have my phone number, and let me know. Tonight, I titled this late night live stream, and in the description I said, "In the spirit of Paul Vanderklay." So, hey, it's Christian here. So I'm gonna go over some things. What is up, William? I'm going to go over some things that stuck out to me that I thought were very interesting happening in the world today. First off, I wanted to say thanks to everyone who put up with my promotion for this last podcast that I had come out with James Taylor Foreman. I promoted it pretty heavily on Twitter and, a couple of community posts on YouTube. I was really excited about it, mainly to bring in this guy who was so very much in the corner, but not of the corner. Let's see. William saying, "Me and my shadow got back from Senate Bible study tonight, Monday nights." So I wanted to go over a few things. That basically, let's see. I've got some clips from the Alex O'Connor and Modern Wisdom podcast that just dropped. And then I've got some stuff from the John Vervaeke conversation that I thought was very fascinating about ritual. And then I want to kind of go over a few thoughts on this integral theory and steps of healing that were kind of touched on in the James Taylor Foreman podcast. So, man, Branch, you telling me all about his Bible study tonight. Revelations chapter 8 in the Jewish sources. Last time I did a live stream was on Revelations. So I guess I'm gonna get started. First thing I need to do is I need to check these clips to make sure that their audio is working. So, and I'm gonna put it in a layout, fancy layout. Let's see how this one works. Here we go. So, if let me know if you can hear the audio on this, because last time I
not that really matters in my view. But then if somebody said that they liked that, and then somebody like accidentally spilled a drink over them, and they get up and just like deck them, you'd be like, well, hold on a second. I thought you were sort of embodying this Christian ethos. Think to myself, well, I'm going to be charitable here because, but for the grace of God, there go I. I think, well, that's a very Christian sentiment, Alex, And if you met someone who's a Christian and you said, what do you like about Christianity? And they said, oh, I just love this figure of Jesus who would just go around forgiving people. And even when people deserved punishment, let him who is without sin cast the first stone. That's the most incredible, it is just the most based part of the entire Gospels, man. That's just unbelievable. Unfortunately, it's not in the earliest manuscripts of John, so it's probably added on at a later point, and Jesus probably never actually said that. Not that that really matters in my view. But then if somebody said that they liked that, and then somebody like accidentally spills a drink over them, and they get up and just like deck them, you'd be like, well, hold on a second. I thought you were sort of embodying this Christian ethos. and they'll sort of talk the talk but won't walk the walk. And so in that case, I think they love the tree but hate the fruits. That might not be the correct interpretation of Jesus is saying in the Gospel of Thomas there. Experience that and think to myself, well, I'm going to be charitable here because, but for the grace of God, there go I. I think, well, that's a very...
So what Alex is talking about here in this conversation with Chris Williamson, they're talking about Christianity as a the whole cultural Christianity. Richard Dawkins, he even talks about Tom. Oh gosh, it's late. I'm gonna try to do this. Tom Holland. He talks about kind of Douglas Murray being these avatars for cultural Christianity, that they admire the fruit of Christianity, but they don't want to be, they're not part of the tree. And what does it mean to actually be a part of the tree or to just enjoy the fruit? So in that, he said he goes into this really serious, it's kind of interesting how seriously he takes this, the ideas of Christian morality. And there's interesting things going on with Alex O'Connor, because earlier in this episode, like within the first 3 minutes, he says, I just got back, and my friend Justin Brierley. If this question is for me, Rico, the question is yes. And so Alex O'Connor, he says, my friend Justin Brierley, and he says he has this book called, The Surprising Rebirth and Belief in God. So it shocked me that in the first few minutes he says, my friend Justin Brierley. He does not call him a guy that I debate with or a guy that I do, I kind of spar with. He says my friend. And then he goes on to talk about this idea about what it means to be a part of, and he kind of is scoffing at the cultural Christianity that he sees in the culture. And he's calling kind of some of what he sees as a resurgence being something more just part of the culture war, and not what he is looking deeply into. What does it mean to be Christian? What does it mean to be a part of the vine or a part of the tree? And this first clip that I just played, he's talking about how you respond to people, and do you take the teaching seriously? And so that was very interesting. I've got a few more clips to play here. So I'm working here on these clips. Let's look at this one. He goes on to talk about here, answering the question, can you choose to believe in God, or is faith just something that happens? And he talks about, and at this part he's going to go into, we're so far down the stream from Jordan Peterson saying, do you believe in God? Well, I want to act as if I do. And you're seeing this, that was years ago, and now you're seeing this crop up in these different ways. Even the Tom Holland part, but this is
Ayan basically said, if I'm not mistaking her, she said that she chooses to believe these things. She chooses to believe that Jesus is born of a virgin, that he rose from the dead, which seems kind of weird and a bit obscene. How can you just choose to believe something? And a lot of people will say, well, I can't choose to believe something. You can't choose to believe that Australia doesn't exist. It doesn't work like that. But interestingly, I began to notice that if somebody becomes convinced that Christianity is true, like through philosophical argumentation, historical argument for the resurrection of Jesus, okay, Christianity must be true. And then you hear all these moral claims that it makes about family values, gender roles, stuff, and you think, well, I don't know about all of that, but I've just become so convinced that Christianity is true that, like, it must just be that this is the moral way, and I choose to just believe that, right? No one really bats an eyelid. They might think it's wrong to do that, but they don't think it's like illogical. They don't think it's like a sort of an illegal chess move, as Peterson
reversing the stack and going in the other direction is something where people go, hang on a second.
Yeah. So I am
So Alex is talking about Ayaan Hirsi Ali saying, when kind of confronted with her new faith, that what does it mean to be a Christian? And she says, why I am now a Christian. And the first article that she put out with the Unheard magazine was something along the lines of, because of all these good things from Christianity. So he kind of goes back to the Alex O'Connor saying, it seemed like she was being an admirer of the fruit. But if you go on and you listen to her talk and some of the other videos, and then he actually went down over to New York and listened to her have a conversation with Richard Dawkins about this, she goes on in depth about her story about coming to faith, coming to kind of the end of her atheism, and that when she needed spiritual reality in her life, and what did she do? She didn't necessarily come to an idea that, okay, I logically or rationally come to this place where these things, I've looked at all the evidence, and the virgin birth and the resurrection makes rational sense to me. No, she says, I began to participate, whether that was pray, go to church. Then she says, and then I chose to believe that these things were true. And this is not how apologetics has worked in the last many, many years. The apologetic art, it's to come at it from the arguments and which argument's best, and then and from there I deduct the right rational way or belief. And what Ayaan who was part of this new atheist cohort, she didn't come at it that direction. She had emotional, spiritual need in her life. She was depressed. She was involved in a type of alcoholism, going to therapy, seeking answers. Nothing worked, and she began to participate in Christian ritual and practice, and participate in the action of those beliefs, not in the beliefs in her mind, but going to a church and praying. And she also makes this distinction, because then you could get into this, she came out of Islam, you could get into some kind of perennial thing. And she made a distinction where she said, what's up, Pete? She made a distinction where she said that I got death threats from people part of Islamism, and then she got letters saying I'm praying for you when she was an atheist from Christians. And so this was like kind of a I don't know, that contrast for her. And then it's also a moral argument that's being made. But really what's so fascinating is her coming to this was, there was the proposition that she had some kind of spiritual void in her life, you could say. But then she took it to another level, and began to practice this, and gain the perspective, and follow these ritualistic procedures with going to church, prayer, worship, singing, confessing. And so that was when Ayaan Hirsi Ali, apparently at New York, she gets through telling this story of coming to this faith and this practice, and she gets through it, and everyone's kind of clapping, so glad that she has found this, and they're happy for her. And then Richard Dawkins, and the way that he does, he says, well, but Ayaan, so you're telling me you believe that Jesus was born of a virgin? And it's like, what's so interesting is he jumps right to the propositional, and by doing so, he looks past his friend. Maybe. And I wasn't there, and I haven't seen the whole thing, but it's like, instead of that moment, it was like, instead he had to kind of like step back into the old Dawkins that we know. But that may not be the whole story. I just think that it's interesting. But so these things, he mentions Justin Brierley on Chris Williamson's podcast. Alex O'Connor does in The Surprising Rebirth and Belief in God. He talks about the difference between people that admire Christianity when we're having this whole conversation about cultural Christianity being something maybe co-opted by the right, because you even see figures like James Lindsay cozying back up to the religious, right, even though he's an atheist, working with Charlie Kirk, and you see, like I said, Douglas Murray kind of doing the same thing. He kind of put Jordan Peterson in there, but he kind of then backed off on that, not completely, but I actually hadn't finished this, but the first 20, maybe I listened to the first 20, 30 minutes, and it's just so interesting. And I saw another clip that actually Justin Brierley posted on Twitter, which is of Alex O'Connor quoting verbatim like C.S. Lewis' apologetic prayer or something like that, which I haven't taken a minute to look at that. But anyways, he's an interesting character, and the journey that he's on is one to watch, and that's very interesting, that I find interesting in the interplay. Because if you go back, you watch his Jordan Peterson conversation, you watch his Richard Dawkins conversation, and I think this one, this is his second one with Chris Williamson in the last 6 months. And the last one was much more, well, I haven't got to the end of this one, but all I know is that Alex O'Connor, he's critical of this cultural Christian revival, not of Christianity itself. He's critical of the cultural Christian revival. He did also put Russell Brand into that category. And I think that Russell, whether it's part of a cultural zeitgeist or something more than that for him, I think it's probably a mix of both. But I wouldn't put him in the same category because he's confessed and been baptized, and so that's different. That is a different level of participation. All right, so I want to move on to different video that I watched or listened to very recently, and let's see if I can get to the right. This is with no, I went to the wrong one. This is the video that I watched with John Vervaeke, and this is a part 2 series with what to see. I don't know which one is the one. No, I got it. This is called Philosophy, Spirituality, Esotericism, and the Meaning Crisis with the Esoteric Channel and Seekers of Unity channel. So I'm going to play
socioeconomic, cultural, political, existential, spiritual, theological, philosophical dimensions to ritual. I am trying to address what I think is a missing piece in the picture, which is a cognitive scientific account of ritual. And I think this will have an important role to play, a rhetorical role in the proper sense, maybe proleptic. What I mean by that, or protreptic, what I mean by that is that a lot of people have that sort of, how do I get into it question. It's difficult.
Sorry. I know that my streaming is a little choppy here. Let's get back on this. So this video is John Vervaeke talking about ritual, and so ritual is procedural. It's something that you can take in from perspective. It's participatory. It's based on a propositional, but it's not only the propositional. And this is what I go back to my conversation with Jordan Hall when I said I feel like we've outpaced this man, I have had trouble tonight. In my back. Let's see here. So, yes, let's see here. Joseph says liturgy is applied theology. And David said he likes esoterica. Can someone get Christian a co-host? Blah da dum cha. Um, so yes, let me see if I can get my clip back here, and we'll get going on this. For all those patient people out there, thank you for patiently waiting with me. Let's see here. Yes, back on the right one. We'll start it over and see if we don't crash this thing again. And here we go.
Socioeconomic, cultural, political, existential, spiritual, theological, philosophical dimensions to ritual. I am trying to address what I think is a missing piece in the picture of ritual, which is a cognitive scientific account of ritual. And I think this will have an important role to play, a rhetorical role in the proper sense, maybe proleptic. What I mean by that, or protreptic, what I mean by that is that a lot of people have that sort of how do I get into it question. It's difficult. How do I take it up? I don't believe all this stuff. And aren't rituals just sort of empty actions? And of course, there's prejudice against the notion of ritual because of what the Freudian reduction of ritual to neurotic symptomology, things like that. And so let's be very clear what I'm doing. I'm going to lay out the cognitive scientific. I'm going to depend on Justin and Zevi to challenge, unpack it, bring in the other dimensions. But I'm trying to at least socioeconomic, cultural.
All right. So Vervaeke, and actually, Rico, this is something to try to, I'm not going to try to argue the scientific facts of the history of the New Testament because I would lose. But what I want to do is to look at, is I want to look at what Vervaeke's talking about with ritual here in the larger scheme of John Vervaeke's work related to cognitive science and the 4 P's of knowing and 4E cognition and these things. I think that from where I come from, my perspective, my experience is so much related to the ritualistic experience of the modern church, preparing worship services, embodying them, having the perspective of 1 to 500, like my experience this way versus what I am doing, leading the songs, taking that, cross-referencing it with other parts of religious ritual. And so he's wanting to lay out an argument for why ritual is an important part of meaning, an important part of how we actually understand the world. We are in a big trick thinking that the only way to understand the world is through what, to Rico's point, which if I can find it back here, he says, if I can get it on the screen. Here we go. He says this. Maybe it's going to show up. Maybe not. Why can't I get it to show up? I'll read it. I'm just asking, but why is everyone so confident in this belief when the New Testament's earliest known manuscripts is after 200 in the Greek? So, okay, there it is. I'm not talking about the confidence, but I'm just talking about the reality that this is only one part of knowing, and the idea that, the science of history is, we have history and this is our answer and this is our historical answer. And that by itself, that piece of knowledge, 200 years, that's when we get X. That defines all of reality. Is that proposition about how the Bible is formed that way. And that is only one part, and it is, science looking back 2,000 years, trying to piece together things. What we can know today, what we can know right now, what we can know in our life is that ritual plays a part in orienting us to reality. And so Vervaeke is gonna, let's see, I'm unaware of that, if that's true. You might be talking to other people. So I'm gonna hit another clip here with Vervaeke from this conversation. Okay, and it's going to be this one, and that's the wrong one. So I'm gonna try this again. I'm gonna share this other clip of, try this one. No, that's not it either. All right, one more try.
Rational is the aspiration to be more rational. And the first taste of rationality is the aspiration to be rational. And so again, at the heart, I'm trying to show people again and again and again, the imaginal and the rational are bound inherently together. Why am I doing this? Because I'm undermining the Freudian argument that ritual is intrinsically irrational by nature and neurotic. Okay, so what we need now is we need imaginally augmented serious play that can afford our aspiration, that it can afford us going through transformative experiences that drive our aspirational processes. So we imaginally augment serious play so that we go through transformative experiences so that we can be oriented effectively and engaged.
So he's saying several things here. The imaginal is the way that we we have to aspire to want to understand. We have to aspire to and I'm back, and we still have people hanging out. So what I'm talking about with Vervaeke on this clip is that so he talks about having to aspire to through our imagination, our imaginal realities of how, and I think about this for myself, giving yourself like a vision for the future. What gives you that vision? Something you might believe in, like a proposition about God or about not God. And then what you have then is what you can then put yourself into, and how then you can participate in that, whether that's building a YouTube channel or that's leading worship at church or going to church or participating in religious ritual. And that all those things have to like stack up together. So say then you buy it, like I aspire that there is, I don't want authority. This is giving me an idea that this proposition says that you don't have to have an authority. All right, now I don't have to have an authority. Now I must learn where can I participate and find the embodied reality. I'm looking for a way to practice this non-responsibility life to a higher authority. What do? I create rituals. And those rituals, like in that framework, you'd have to tell me what you think that they would be. But probably some that create less meaning, because the telos of that meaning is you. And if you can't get outside of yourself, then you're trapped. And so that would be then the opposite idea, that I aspire to understand the God that made everything. And then I'm going to try to understand that through the best means that I have, something like sacred scripture. And then also, well, it's not just about me and my Bible. It is also something about how I embody my life. And is there a way to like really take that as deep as I possibly can, going every week to practice this thing, or practicing this thing in small ways in your life every day. And so, but he then is saying that something about Freud has taken this out of the reality, and we're going to get into that. So I'm going to present another clip here. Let's see if this is the right one, and it is. Here we go.
All you need is the scriptures and the confession of the scriptures, the affirmation of the scriptures is all you need, and the reduction of the sacraments first to 2 and then to 0. I think is exactly the historical reason. So we have to be very careful here. I think your point is legitimate, but and I don't think you're doing this, Justin, but I just want to caution, we have to remember that is a Protestant thing, and therefore we have to be careful about being ethnocentric around this concern. It's like, for many other parts of the world, orthopraxy takes much more importance over orthodoxy. And so but nevertheless, we are in whether we agree with it or not, we're in a post-Protestant West, or still maybe in the United States, a Protestant West.
Okay, Vervaeke says a lot here, and Rico, if you're listening, he said something that there's a problem with what Sola Scriptura has done in the West, and what the part of the telos of Sola Scriptura is sola histora. Sola histora, that belief and reality is only wrapped up in what I can understand through history. And if that history then shows me that this is how, I agree that this history says that the first Christian gospel was 200 years after Christ, then the only thing that I have to base my reality off of is this proposition. And so now I'm operating from that. And it's because I can only operate from the proposition that history gives me, or the proposition that, the science of the last 200 years gives me on certain things. And again, always the problem is that I'm not anti-history, I'm not anti-science, all these types of things. It's the oblongness of the power that plays in our life, opposed to things like religious ritual, religious practice, religious community, religious worship can provide in our lives. So let's see, I'm going to play this clip one more time because it's very good.
Thank you. And I agree with you. I think that first part, it comes from sola scriptura, right? Protestantism. All you need is the scriptures and the confession of the scriptures, the affirmation of the scriptures, is all you need. And the reduction of the sacraments first to 2 and then to 0, I think is exactly the historical reason. So we have to be very careful here. I think your point is legitimate, but and I don't think you're doing this, Justin, but I just want to caution, we have to remember that is a Protestant thing, and therefore we have to be careful about being ethnocentric around this concern. It's like for many other parts of the world, orthopraxy takes much more importance over orthodoxy, and so but nevertheless, we are in whether we agree with it or not, we're in a post-Protestant West, or still maybe in the United States, a Protestant West.
So he says that the West within the telos of sola scriptura is focuses so much on the orthodoxy versus many other parts of the world or other times in history have focused way more on orthopraxy. So, what's interesting about the whole movement with the Orthodox Church that we dance with here in this little corner of the internet is that it's known actually for its orthopraxy. And it's saying that the orthopraxy is the orthodoxy. And if that doesn't make sense to you, it's saying that the right way is actually the right understanding. So, a point that I continue to make on this channel is something like when Martin Luther, came up with his solas, it was still so wrapped culturally and in that historical time around the orthopraxis of worship in church. And for him to say sola scriptura is so radically different from a Baptist to say that because of what its perspective, what you experience when you say sola scriptura as a high church Lutheran and what you experience when you say sola scriptura as a low church Baptist, it's not as different maybe today as it was 500 years ago, but it's still very different. And so right practice or the right way of doing or trying to what I'm not trying to say is right as in this is the right way. Like I don't want to get into that polemical argument. It's that I'm saying the importance of prax of is not arbitrary. And I come from a world where we don't we said that it is arbitrary. How you do this thing is arbitrary. What only matters is the heart. The heart is the only thing that matters. But how is our heart formed? It is not just formed only from propositional ideas. It is formed from how we do things, how we participate in things, what we do with the propositions into our lives. Like all those things together create the orthopraxy of our lives. And he went on to make in this clip too, he said, when you took away the sacraments down to 2 and then to none, and you have to understand where John is coming from a similar place that I come from. John is coming from a low church reality, a dispensational church reality, and he, what is I don't remember which of the estuary conferences, Quest for the Spiritual Home that he's on, is something with this idea that connecting to the sacred, connecting to the sacrament, connecting to this ritual, like he's on that journey and he's not just on that journey for himself, but he's trying to come at it from his expertise, which is cognitive science, and making a case, an argument that these things aren't arbitrary, and that there are ways to understand yourself and to understand the world and understand reality that don't only come from things you read in a book. Don't only come. They do also come from things that you read in a book or you hear on a YouTube video, but that how you engage those ideas also are equally as important to informing meaning and reality as the ideas are themselves. How you attend with your attention, with your posture, what your gains your perspective, gives your perspective, and it also gives your body perspective. So there's another piece that he did. I think I have one more clip here. So I'm going to add this other clip. Here.
In publication, multiple publications of this idea of excising something from what I call an ecology of practices and trying to land it as a technology that can be used. First of all, because it removes all of the cultural critique and transformation that was built into, for example, the Buddhist path of mindfulness. And instead, you become sort of, the goal is to make you sort of satisfied with being a corporate drone or something. And also, as you rightly point out, it drives spiritual bypassing and narcissism, which are deleterious. I have argued, given, and I can't give the full cognitive science arguments, they're out there, they're on YouTube, they're in publication. There is no panacea practices. All practices have weaknesses as well as strengths that are bound together, and you need to set up complementary sets of practices that do opponent process. And then I have been very, very critical in publication, multiple publications, of this idea of excising something from what I call an ecology of practices and trying to land it as a technology that can be used.
Okay, so he says two things here that are important. He says, I've been very critical of like what Freud did to confession with psychotherapy, to create a psychotechnology out of this. He stripped therapy from an ecology of practice. And this goes back to his point about the sacraments, when confession was a sacrament of all church. And he says, Freud excised that out of, he excised that out of the church, and he took it away from the ecology of practices. In that conversation, he also talks about the ecology of institution, with the monastery, the university, and the church all playing a very important role in ecology of institution, and that now our institutions are divorced. They've been excised from that ecology. Science universities that don't have any connection to explicit sacredness, any explicit something that to help curb the hubris, which he then goes in to say that when that happens, it creates spiritual bypass. So you're bypassing the spiritual, and you're just focused on the technology that has been divorced from this ecology, and I mean that even goes into Ayaan Hirsi Ali's conversation about the cut flower, and this does go into the cultural Christianity, but the cut flower, when you cut the flower away from this system that it was, and so then you have Freud excising things like confession and turning it into just the technology of psychotherapy, and that's just a major problem in the meaning crisis, is this fragmentation. And so anyways, that is one of the big things I've talked about. Justin Wells hits on this. I've talked about this multiple times on the channel, on his book about truth in documentary filmmaking. And then just this idea. So you have an ecology, like when you think of like a organic growth, of these things are all working together, and then you strip one away, and that has happened, and you have these giant institutions that are divorced from their history, from this, they're oblonged, and they're not spherical, or they're not, in right tension. That was the other part he said. That even he said he's something about the panacea of practice. Like there's no perfect way of practicing. We can have ideals, and so the part about this is like, so then he talked about opponent processing and these things like tension. And you could take something like the Divine Liturgy and modern worship, and that's like a real tension. But what do these opponent processing things have to teach each other, and what does it mean for them to come into right tension with one another, so that things that are good, things that are held in the right tension. You don't want too much slack, or you don't want it to be so tight that it breaks. And these are all things that really interest me when it comes to Christianity. And of course, John, in this conversation, he goes on to talk about the ecology of spiritual practices that he's doing, and they honestly, I mean, they're unsettling to me in the sense because it's so outside of, from what's normal, or, what I understand. But I do understand what he's talking about in a general sense. And I think that, and I'm hoping that I've had this conversation with my friend, Matthew Parlato, here in the chat. Oops, I was trying to get, stumbling forward and upward. We were talking about this on the phone the other night, and this is a part of what I think is, it's part of what I want to be a part of, and is helping this conversation, helping these ideas be distilled into culture and into the world, maybe half a level down, from the CogSci classroom to the, every man's YouTube. So, let's see. I'm going to hit up some of these comments. There's something really strange between the liturgical degradation of the West in the last 500 years, along with the obsession of precision of doctrine. What's interesting, I think, Joseph, wait, is this the Joseph? Wait a second. Is this the Joseph from Grail Country live streams and Paul's live streams? Because I've looked for, you look like it. The picture is hard for me to see. Yes, it is. I just blew up the screen. Yes, and Joseph, hit me up in an email on my channel if you're still watching. My email is on my channel. Just send me an email because I want to talk to you. And let's see. Okay. I would love to have this conversation with you, Joseph. So, yes. To just be honest, the Calvin's theology became more complex as the liturgical life became more simplistic. But you have to, I mean, that does go back to the printing press. It goes back to having access to words and access, and again, like, I think that there's probably things and I think actually we should say there are things that Calvin or Luther brought us that are good, and were necessary, maybe even. But again, like this outpacing, and again, even like Luther's or Calvin's world, like, coming to the idea of the real presence versus, the body and blood or whatever, it's still, again, the ecology of practice is still, hundreds of years closer to where we are today. And then again, the idea is that we needed to contend, in some ways, with rationality. And I think I would go to say something like modern orthodoxy, which, if that's a thing, stands on the shoulders of that work as we come back around now. But what is it also showing us is like it, well, just think about it this way, you know, because we, you know, looking back to 500 years, to the printing press, to Martin Luther, whatever, you're asking, you're saying, okay, what was he doing? You know, there was corruption. The church was maybe just, there were problems. We can just say there were problems. And there was problems everywhere. But everyone's arguing about Calvin now. See, that's the thing. Like, and when y'all, here's the thing: you're gonna do in the words part, you're gonna do Martin Luther and Calvin, even if you're Orthodox. You're gonna do it over. You're gonna do that because you're stuck in the words. I get to have like this other perspective and this embodied and think out loudness. And I so you know, I think that there were, let me see if I can get my train of thought back. So yeah, so if you're now where we have this, it's almost like the rationality has become corrupt and we must break the spell of rationality so that, you know, we can have a more embodied faith. And but at the same time, it was like the completely embodied faith needed some rationality at one point in history, because you could just trick everybody into, you know, buying indulgences. So, you know, I think that that is I don't know, I think that's important. There's some fun stuff happening over here in the old chat at 11 o'clock Central Standard Time. I want to make sure, I'm going to shoot this out here. This is for Joseph. I'm putting it here. Shoot me an email. And yeah, that was, I'm going to play this one more time because I think it's just that good.
I have been very, very critical in publication, multiple publications, of this idea of excising something from what I call an ecology of practices and trying to land it as a technology that can be used. First of all, because it removes all of the cultural critique and transformation that was built into, for example, the Buddhist path of mindfulness. And instead, you become sort of, the goal is to make you sort of satisfied with being a corporate drone or something. And also, as you rightly point out, it drives spiritual bypassing and narcissism, which are deleterious. I have argued, given, and I can't give the full cognitive science arguments, they're out there, they're on YouTube, they're in publication. There is no panacea practices. All practices have weaknesses as well as strengths that are bound together, and you need to set up complementary sets of practices.
So on that note, complementary sets of practices. This is where I come, my concert on Friday night that you take very seriously, in the sense that, like, how do you get the complementary practice of where David is not reverent in his praise before the Lord, and then you have, you touch the Ark of the Covenant, you die. Like, those are like in major tension, and too many times we want to just say it's one or the other. And so that's why I'm not like the panacea of practices, that there's everything has its weakness. And I can tell you, like, you know, in the 50s and the 60s, when the boomers rejected reverent sacred practice for, you know, the Jesus movement and hippie culture and casualness, they did it for a reason. They did it for a reason because they needed, you have to allow for it. And I think that we need to keep that in mind as we move forward in this revival of other practices, that's important. The other thing too is that I'll venture to say that there are parts. Well, I'm going to end it on this with thank you, Risto. I'm going to end it on this section here. First thing I want to say is my conversation with James Taylor Foreman today was a lot of fun. Of course, I recorded it a week or two ago, but and he's talking about integral theory, James Wilbur. And this really goes into another part of life, like this spectrum of the way. A long time ago when I first started this channel, and I had a podcast on Chad the Alcoholic's channel, The Friday Morning Nameless, Grim Grizz tagged me in that video the next day. He's like, and I said something about Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. And he's like, what is the way? What is the way? And the way is not just ideas. And we're talking about that now, but we confuse that all the time. The way is not only one day a week. It's a way of being, living, moving, breathing. But within that, it's also just not arbitrarily, mindlessly going through life. It's attending to things purposefully and in their proper order, and with a endpoint that draws you into an integrated life and a whole life. And I'm definitely not always there, or I'm still trying to figure that out. And my wife will tell you, my children would probably tell you. But that is also the journey. And then that also points to like this idea of missing the mark or missing the way, is that we need a rhythm to help pull us back into alignment. And so with my conversation with James, he tells a story on his Substack, James Taylor Foreman, called The Metaphor. And in that story, he talks about going through these like different states of recognizing reality, and we operate at these different states. And then he also talks about his journey now into a type of sobriety in his life, the history of AA, and that's like a process, and it's a formalized process of healing, and it's reintegrating the psyche into like integrated into an integrated state, and that we kind of move through these phases in our life, like the ideological, the personal, the spiritual or transcendent, the base, the hedonistic places, and so I want to encourage people to check that out. And a friend on here in this space, his name's Mostly Not Working, follow him on Twitter. He's in the comments on this little corner quite a bit, and he said, what about that Carey Nieuwhof clip with John Mark Comer, in which this is my conversation with Food Truck Gimli. We talked a little bit about this as well, but his recent book called Practicing the Way. John Mark Comer is of the lineage within Protestantism, within evangelicalism, and the lineage of people like Dallas Willard, people like Richard Foster, that have tried to connect these kind of like an ecology of practices with worship within evangelicalism. And it seems to always kind of get stuck because the church doesn't know how to incorporate this. It doesn't know how to formalize it because they want to keep it only into the personal. They don't want to institutionalize it, which is institutionalizing the sacred is the sacraments. This is how you receive grace in life. And so what John Mark Comer is doing is he's trying to maybe be a part of that again. And I'm going to play that clip. We're probably going to end with this clip, but that showing practicing the way that we seem to be in this cycle. And he goes through this, and he quotes a book. You'll have to get it in the clip. He quote that there's like a 6-part cycle to life. And you can talk about, 7 steps of integration, and that a lot of modern evangelical Baptist world and a lot of Protestants have adopted that model. It gets stuck at level 3, and then people, when they feel like they hit that wall at level 3, they then actually start or want to adopt a new religion. And he talks about, like, you look into our culture and what we see with finding meaning in the cultural wars against, it's like, well, you just move out of the church at this level 3 point, and then you're going to start that again. You start it again. You have to bust through that wall, and that wall is usually when you come to that point of deep suffering or deep pain or deep misunderstanding that causes a type of crisis, and then you either reject where you are with that and move into something else, or you're able to go through it and survive that and be deeper integrated as a result. So I think all these things together, going all the way back to looking at Christianity from Anya Hirsi Ali, to being a part of Christianity, admiring Christianity, to practicing Christianity. What does it mean to practice Christianity? To be formed through these rituals, that it's not only about the ideas, but about like participating in the ideas, and that informs your ideas about him, and that informs the reality of them to you. Are these things real? Well, something's real through this practice. And then this clip we're gonna kind of end on here is this one from, it's a video I made. I clipped it into one of my videos back when I first started making videos, like in February, and I clipped in this John Mark Comer conversation with Gary Newhoff. So share. My first week as a YouTuber is the name of this clip. And here we go. Bust it up a little bit more. I just hit the wrong button. Oh. Why I decided to go to the... Man.
Christians in America never mature beyond stage 3. So the first 3 stages are, stage 1 is, they call it recognition of God. Ancient Christians would call it awakening. There's a book, but at the end, they argue that these stages are not inevitable, that pain, our suffering, our failure, our lessons learned in hard knocks of life, used to help other people. So there is a book, it's called The Critical Journey. I did a teaching on it many years ago. You can find, that's a popular version of it. And they basically break the spiritual journey into 6 stages. We don't need to go through those. But at the end, they argue that these stages are not inevitable, that most Christians in America never mature beyond stage 3. So the first 3 stages are, stage 1 is, they call it recognition of God. Ancient Christians would call it awakening. Evangelicals would call it getting saved. Stage 2, they call the life of discipleship. They don't mean discipleship as I would use that word, but they mean like basic kind of discipleship to Jesus, learning to read your Bible, go to church, be in a small group, learning basic Christian doctrine. And then stage 3 is what they call the productive life. So you do things for Jesus now. You lead a small group, or you lead a missions team, or you join the board at your church, or you become a deacon, or you become a youth pastor, or you're doing something, or you're taking your work seriously as a follower of Jesus. All beautiful things. But that's just the first half of the spiritual journey. All that to say, I think that Sunday-based churches are pretty helpful for people in those first 3 stages.
Yep.
And increasingly unhelpful after that, which is why you have this tragic phenomenon where a lot of the people that have the deepest appetite for psychospiritual development, they want to psychologically mature and they want to spiritually mature. Often the enemy is at work in all of our hearts, feel the need, let's just set aside whether it's legitimate or wildly illegitimate, feel the need to step out of Sunday-based churches and almost graduate from that in order to continue the spiritual journey. Now you're 44 and you're like, I've heard this sermon series 9 times and it's not helping me fix my
And I've led this group
wayward
for 10
teenager
years.
or my broken marriage or my addiction to whatever, or my pain from my childhood. And so then they move on, which is often just a way to deepen narcissism. I'm not saying it's wrong always to do that, but rather than liberate your heart from it. But on the church side, most churches often offer no discipleship pathway past that 3rd stage. So it's basically, most churches do evangelism pretty well. They do basic discipleship pretty well. And then they invite people into leadership. Lead a small group, volunteer, lead this team, do our thing. And then that's where the vision of human maturity, spiritual maturity tends to end. A couple of stages. In their theory, you hit this, not a stage, but an experience that, and they label, it's not this linear. And they would say over and over again, life is not this linear. And we mature unevenly. We might be ahead in one stage, in one aspect of our life, and behind in another. But they have this concept they call the wall, which is some kind of an experience. I think of the AA line, the only way out is through. Meaning it's some kind of an experience of pain and suffering that you can't bypass or deny or fake it till you make it. It's something that will permanently stand in your path. It could be a divorce. It could be the loss of a loved one. It could be failure, bankruptcy. It could be a terminal disease or a chronic illness, any number of things. But there's no way around it. The only way out is through. And so you can either stop in your spiritual journey or regress in your spiritual journey, which is what a lot of people do. Like the phenomenon of deconstruction, one way to think about that psychologically is people go through the first 3 stages of Christian spiritual development. They hit the wall. They have some kind of experience of pain and suffering. And rather than go through it, they jump ship to another, I'll just use the word religious system. And I mean that in the more Keller sense of like a system of beliefs, ideas, values, practices that give meaning and purpose to life. That could be the 3 most common that I saw in Portland were 3rd wave anti-racism, all things LGBTQ and pride and kind of ally kind of worldview, activist worldview, and then careerism, kind of like work is God. Those are the 3 most common alternative religions that I saw in Portland. So people jump ship and then they go back and they start at phase 1 again. It's awakening, but now it's a different religion. And so it's like they're born again and they're just on a high and they're in this honeymoon phase and I can't believe it. I never saw before and I never realized this and I was blind and I was dumb and I was lost and I've been saved. It's basically a salvation motif. And then they become a life of discipleship. Then they're learning and they're reading and they're taking all of this information in, and then the productive life, then they're doing things and they're leading things and they're saying things. And it's just inevitable that people will hit the wall again. And then what? So in the critical journeys, the next stage is if you go through the wall, you go into stage 4 that they call the inner journey or the journey inward, which would be basically like the valley, you know what I mean? Or the wilderness, this period often marked by a lot of soul searching. In millennial language, you do the work often of therapy around family of origin and your relationship to your parents and your culture and your shadow and your personality and your Enneagram number, all of that stuff. It's good space for that. Then stage 5 is what they call the journey outward. So you go through that. And again, if you continue to mature, and people get stuck at every single one of these phases. There's some people that go into therapy and the deep work, and then 20 years later, they're still just
still in the deep work,
bemoaning.
Still
Stuck. Most people would agree. There is a season, see it a lot when people start therapy. It's like it often gets worse before it gets better. And they just, every conversation you have with them is just very negative. And that is actually, I think, a healthy part of almost like getting the impurities out of your system. It's almost like a charcoal cleanse of your body. But you don't want to be there for the rest of your life. You want to move through that to a place of greater acceptance, gratitude, joy, seeing the good and the bad in your experience, in your family, and your parents, and all of that. And so then you go to the journey outward, which is where you kind of begin to reemerge almost into, it looks very similar to stage 3, the productive life. You're out doing things now again. You're leading often, you're serving, you're making a contribution through your church or ministry or work. But so from the outside, it looks very similar to stage 3, but it's very different because your motivational structure is radically different. You don't need what you used to need from success. There's that Rolheiser line, success still feels good in the second half of life, but it has very little to teach us. Meaning past that stage, we're learning way more from our failure. We learn a lot from our successes early on because they tell us what we should do with our life. Whereas if you have the favor and the grace to be successful at anything at a young age, it's almost like a high five, like you're on the right track from life and God and community, like keep going this direction. So success is very helpful. Not all of us have that gift, but very helpful in the first half. And in the second half, it's great. But
better success than not.
Yes.
But it doesn't own you.
And then stage 6 is what they call the life of love. And this is just, most of the people we know in this stage are very old, but I know some people there and they just exude the love of the Trinity. And just the gift is just being in their presence. It's not even if it's a pastoral example, it's not their leadership. Most of them aren't leading actively anymore. It's not necessarily the preaching or teaching or writing, though it might be just dripping with wisdom. It's them.
So this is my stage 5 of healing that John Mark listed in there. This is my project. And suffering is a reality in life. I see John Mark Comer on Carrie's podcast reaching out to me as an evangelical and saying, let's stay maybe and figure this thing out together. In Christian YouTube and Big Evang, I only encounter most of the time propositional argument battles, left and right culture battles, deconstruction, reconstruction. It's an endless circle stuck on level 3, just like he said. And John Mark sees the same people I've seen, the young and the restless, the reformed, the megachurch, and just gets ugly and tragic. So I'm going to this symbolic meaning conference because I'm looking for real ways and real people to find stories about God that can nourish my soul, my marriage, my family, my church, my community. And though I may or may not be Orthodox, and considering there's not an Orthodox church within 2 hours of me, that's probably not going to happen. But I think there are parts of old models that need to be damned. We have to take what we've learned in the last 5 or 10 years. We have to embody it without shame, but in hope. In the future, I'm going to be talking about my journey with Christian worship and how, as a modern rock and roll Baptist, I learned to value and begin to practice historical liturgical forms of worship, and hope to continue to lead Baptist-type people in churches, evangelical types, to these historical yet fresh practices and how they can go down deep into your soul, your marriage, your family, and yourself, and your community. Here on YouTube, there's good preaching on here. There's stellar education. There's ideas. There's even community on here. YouTube's like a church, but you can't go to it. So go to church. All right, guys. It's been a good night. The chat's been on fire, and I thank everyone for hanging out. I don't have a lot of other thoughts. I think that's about as good as I can say it. And yeah, it's getting late. I've got another work day tomorrow. Risto, you just mentioned Sleeping Giant. Oh, I know that guy, or I know who that is. That dude went through some. Where a lot of that comes from that guy is because he. Do you know the story about this guy? Risto, do you know the story about the guy from Sleeping Giant? Um, yeah, I relate to his story a lot. Not completely, but it's part of my story. So y'all can look it up. Probably a video out there. But yeah, it's intense. Let's see, who was the guy up early that was trying to like, he wasn't really, he was actually being really cool. Trying to find him. He was the one that was well, I'll just go ahead and tell y'all. So Bristow just said the most worshipful music I've heard was hardcore songs from Sleeping Giant. He was in a Christian band, I can't remember the name of it. A buddy of mine was really into the Christian hardcore scene. He follows this stuff a lot. Zach, if you're out there. And the singer from this band, Sleeping Giant, he had an affair with his best friend's wife, and then his best friend killed himself. So, and he's tried to heal from that. So that's where his music comes from. And that is very raw. But if there's any way to heal from that, if there's a way to heal from that in truth, then there's something that can heal you from that. And probably not going to find it inside yourself. It's a pretty intense one to end on, but Risto, you brought it up, dude. It's probably, I mean, it's why his music's so powerful. So I'm going to end with my new branding here. I hope everyone has felt virtually not alone. I'll have another podcast coming out on Friday with Burn Power. And he did a Taylor Swift documentary that we're going to be talking about from his channel, The Anadromist, and channel The Anadrome. I've got a preview of it in my members only section, and y'all, if you're wanting to help support this channel, that's a good way to start, is through channel membership. The first level membership, you get my members only posts, and you get like a digital logo branding that shows support in the chat. And then for Yours Truly Faithful, level 2, you get previews of upcoming podcasts and there's some other stuff that I have backstage in my behind the members only video playlists. And then level 3, the Yours Truly Believers level, take part in helping actually steer the direction of this channel at this point in things anyways, and we'll have monthly conversations about the channel. So come be a part. And next week I have are you talking to me, Risto, about church? If you are, yeah, man, shoot me an email. Unless you're talking to somebody else. Maybe you're talking to Pseudo Boethus. I'm going to have some announcements next week. I've got 2 big podcasts coming out that I'm excited about that are connected to Symbolic World, and don't get too crazy. Don't go all the way up to the top. But and yeah, it's something that I'm wanting to be a part of, and I want this channel to help be a part of. So yeah, if you're talking to me, Risto, yeah, shoot me an email. It's on my channel. I put it in the chat earlier. So, all right, man. Guys, it tells me that there's 32 people out there watching. Thank you, each one. Thanks for everyone who hung out in the chat. Thanks to the members out there. Yours truly faithful. Yours truly encouragers. Yours truly believers. And yeah, no, not that high on the level. And it's a slow climb. It's a slow climb. But it is connected. So all right. Yeah, I think we're gonna end it here tonight. So thanks everybody for hanging out. I had some fun. Hopefully this is meaningful. Hopefully this was helpful. Probably most helpful to me, but what can you do? All right.
I first encountered Neil and Dirk Robbins on my pilgrimage to the summit, the Symbolic World Summit earlier this spring. Dirk Robbins, musical favorite and Joe. Hey everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in and staying with us until the end of today's episode. Your support and digital connection are truly meaningful to me. If you've enjoyed today's conversation and believe that these discussions bring real value to your life, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. I'd also love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below and let's keep the conversation going. Your feedback and interaction are crucial in making this space even more meaningful. Also, I've opened up channel memberships on YouTube. By joining, we can foster a stronger community of connection and support the continuation of more conversation craft. Membership is set up to foster this in 3 ways. Level 1, connect via members-only community posts for channel feedback, behind-the-scenes moments, and supportive membership branding on comments. In addition, level 2, get to watch podcasts a week before they air, along with other unique members-only videos. At level 3, join scheduled monthly focused small group discussions with other kindred spirits from all over the world. Thank you again for being a part of this journey. Together, we can cultivate meaningful, supportive digital community right here in this little corner of the internet. We'll see you next time.